On the morning of August 23, 1985, a senior operations officer in the Central Intelligence Agency was arrested outside his home in Arlington, Virginia. The arrest was not loud. There were no sirens. Neighbors would later say they noticed nothing unusual. By noon, the story had reached the newswires. By evening, it dominated every intelligence briefing across the Potomac. The officer's name does not matter here. What matters is what happened after. The arrest confirmed what many had suspected but few had proven, that a trusted insider, someone with access to the most sensitive operational details, had been working for the Soviets for nearly a decade. The scale of the compromise was unprecedented. Names, methods, networks, all of it gone. The damage assessments would take years. The institutional trauma would last longer. In the days that followed, a quiet directive moved through the counterintelligence community. It was not written as panic, but it carried the weight of panic. Every anomaly would be re-examined. Every clearance would be re-verified. Every relationship, every financial record, every routine deviation from protocol would be scrutinized with a new and unforgiving lens. Trust was no longer an operating assumption. It was a liability. Thomas Hale read the directive on a Wednesday morning in late August. He was 44 years old, a civilian employee of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and his job was to audit records. Not case files, not operational cables. Records, clearance applications, travel vouchers, document control logs. He worked in a windowless office in a building that did not appear on most maps, and his work was procedural, methodical, and invisible. He had been doing it for 16 years. Hale did not consider himself important. He was not a case officer. He was not law enforcement. He did not carry a weapon or travel to foreign stations. His power, such as it was, resided entirely in his ability to notice patterns. A name appearing where it should not, a timestamp that did not align, a signature on a form that had been countersigned by someone without proper authorization. In the bureaucracy of secrecy, Hale was a custodian of tedium. After August 23rd, tedium became urgency. The directive was clear. All personnel with access to classified materials, including support staff, administrative personnel, and family members with incidental proximity to secure environments, would be subject to enhanced monitoring. The word monitoring was deliberately vague. It meant different things depending on who was being monitored and why. For Hale, it meant re-auditing files he had audited before. It meant looking for discrepancies that had once seemed minor. It meant understanding that the threshold for suspicion had dropped to nothing. He began the work in early September. The first weeks were unremarkable. He reviewed clearance files, cross-referenced travel logs, checked document circulation records against authorization lists. Most of what he found were clerical errors, a misspelled name, a date entered incorrectly. These were corrected, logged, and filed. The system, for all its new paranoia, still functioned. It was in mid-October that Hale found the first anomaly. A document control log from June showed that a classified briefing report had been signed out from a repository at the Pentagon. The signature belonged to a senior analyst in the Soviet Affairs Division. The report had been returned 3 days later, properly logged, with no apparent issue. But when Hale cross-referenced the access log with the analyst's travel records, he discovered that the analyst had been in Brussels on the day the document was signed out. The signature was valid, the analyst had authorization, but the analyst had not been in the building. Hale made a note. He did not escalate. Not yet. Mistakes happened. Proxies signed documents. Administrative staff sometimes checked out materials on behalf of personnel who were traveling. It was irregular, but not unheard of. He moved on. 2 weeks later, he found another irregularity. A different document, this time a technical assessment on Soviet missile guidance systems, had been signed out by the same analyst. Again, the date did not align with the analyst's known location. This time, the analyst was at a conference in California. Hale checked the registry of approved proxies. The list was short. Spouses were permitted to sign out unclassified materials under certain circumstances, but never classified documents. Administrative assistants could do so only with explicit written authorization.
Hale pulled the original sign-out card. The handwriting was not the analyst's. It was smaller, rounder, more careful. He requested a copy of the analyst's personnel file. It included a section for immediate family. The analyst's spouse was listed, Ellen Hale. Hale stared at the name for a long time. Ellen Hale worked as a contractor for a logistics coordination office that supported Pentagon operations. Her clearance was secret, not top secret. She had access to unclassified and low classification materials, mostly supply chain data and transportation manifests. Her work was administrative. Her clearance had been renewed 18 months ago without issue. She had worked in the same capacity for 12 years. She was his wife.
Hale closed the file. He did not go home early. He finished his shift, logged his hours, and drove back to their house in McLean at the usual time. Dinner was already on the table. Ellen asked him about his day. He said it had been fine. Their daughter, 16, complained about a chemistry test. Their son, 13, asked if he could stay over at a friend's house on Saturday. Hale said yes. Ellen smiled. It was an ordinary evening. That night, Hale did not sleep. He lay in bed next to his wife and thought about the signature. He thought about the dates. He thought about the access logs and the travel records and the careful, rounded handwriting. He thought about the directive from late August and the arrest in Arlington and the new unforgiving lens through which every anomaly would now be seen. He did not ask her, not then, not the next day, not the day after that. To understand why, you must understand what asking would have meant. In the weeks following the August arrest, the counterintelligence community had become a machine designed to eliminate risk. Confrontation was risk. A direct question could prompt a cover story. A cover story could be rehearsed, refined, and used to obscure deeper compromise. The guidance was explicit. Do not confront. Document, verify, contain. Let the subject behave normally while the investigation proceeds invisibly. A confronted suspect is a warned suspect. A warned suspect is a lost prosecution. But there was another reason Hale did not ask. He was not an investigator. He was an auditor. He had no authority to interrogate. He had no training in elicitation. If he asked and she lied, he would not know. If he asked and she told the truth, he would be required to report it immediately, and the machinery of containment would begin. And if he asked and she did not understand why he was asking, he would have to explain, and in explaining he would compromise the very investigation he was obligated to protect. So he did not ask. He documented. Over the next 3 weeks, Hale conducted his audit with a precision that bordered on obsession. He did not request Ellen's file directly. That would have flagged his inquiry. Instead, he cross-referenced document access logs across multiple repositories looking for patterns. He found 4 more irregularities. Each time, the signature on the access card belonged to someone who was not physically present. Each time, the handwriting matched. Each time, the documents involved Soviet military assessments, technical briefings, or operational summaries. None of it was accidental. Hale submitted his findings in a memo on November 12th. He did not mention his wife's name. He listed the document numbers, the access dates, and the discrepancies between authorized personnel and actual sign-outs. He noted that the handwriting on the cards was consistent and suggested that a systematic review of contractor access protocols might be warranted. The memo was 2 pages long. It was calm, procedural, and devastating. The response came 6 days later. Hale was summoned to a meeting in a conference room he had never been to before. There were 3 people waiting for him. 2 were from the DIA's Office of Counterintelligence. 1 was from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They thanked him for his thoroughness. They asked him questions about his audit procedures, his access to the files, his relationship to the personnel involved. They did not mention Ellen by name. They did not need to. At the end of the meeting, the FBI agent leaned forward and spoke in a tone that was not unkind, but allowed for no misunderstanding. He said that the matter was now an active investigation. He said that Hale was not to discuss his findings with anyone, including family members. He said that any attempt to warn or inform a subject of interest would be considered obstruction and would be prosecuted. He said that Hale's cooperation was appreciated and that his discretion was essential. Then he asked if Hale understood. Hale said yes. That night, Hale went home.
Ellen was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a stir-fry. Their daughter was upstairs doing homework. Their son was watching television in the living room. Hale stood in the doorway and watched his wife move through the routine motions of an ordinary evening, and he said nothing. The next 3 months were the longest of Thomas Hale's life. He continued his work. He continued to come home at the same time. He continued to sleep next to Ellen and eat breakfast with his children and perform the small habitual rituals of a stable family. But he was not present. He was watching, not for evidence, that was no longer his role. He was watching for signs that she knew, a hesitation, a question about his day that went too deep, a change in routine. He found none. Ellen was exactly as she had always been, efficient, pleasant, unremarkable. If she knew she was being investigated, she gave no indication. If she was afraid, she hid it perfectly. In early February, Ellen was asked to come in for a routine clearance re-verification interview. This was not unusual. Contractors were re-verified periodically, and the timing, while deliberate, had been calibrated to seem random. She went to the interview on a Thursday morning. She came home 3 hours later and said it had been tedious but fine. Hale asked no follow-up questions. That night, the FBI agent called him at a number Hale had been given for emergencies. The agent said that Ellen had answered every question calmly and consistently. She had not lied, she had not evaded. She had described her work, her access, and her responsibilities with precision. She had also, in response to a carefully phrased question about document handling, acknowledged that she had occasionally signed out materials on behalf of analysts who were traveling or unavailable. She said she had done so at their request and had believed it was permitted under her clearance. She said she had always returned the materials promptly. She said she had not read them. The agent paused. Then he said, "We do not believe her."
Hale asked why. The agent said because the documents in question were marked top secret. A contractor with a secret clearance would have known immediately that she was not authorized to handle them. She would have seen the cover sheets. She would have seen the classification markings. She would have known. Either she read them or she passed them to someone else. Either way, it was espionage. The agent said that they would continue the investigation. He said that Hale should continue behaving normally. Then he hung up. March came. April. The investigation expanded in ways Hale was not privy to. He knew only what he was told, which was very little. He knew that Ellen's financial records had been subpoenaed. He knew that her phone records were being analyzed. He knew that surveillance had been initiated, though he did not know the details. He knew that the case was being built quietly, methodically, and without her knowledge. And he knew that at some point, soon, the machinery of containment would move from investigation to action. The arrest happened on a Tuesday in early May. Ellen was taken into custody at her office, not at home. The children were at school. Hale was at work. He received a call from the FBI agent at 11 in the morning. The agent said that Ellen had been arrested and charged with unauthorized disclosure of classified information. He said that she had declined to make a statement. He said that Hale was not under investigation, but that he would need to be interviewed again as part of the case. He said that Hale should inform his children carefully and that resources were available if he needed support. Then the agent said something else. He said that Ellen would likely face a significant prison sentence. He said that cooperation at this stage would not substantially alter the outcome. He said that the case was solid. Then he wished Hale luck. Hale sat in his office for 20 minutes without moving. Then he drove home. He picked up his daughter from school. He picked up his son from a friend's house. He brought them both into the living room and sat them down and told them that their mother had been arrested. He did not tell them why, not exactly. He said there had been a misunderstanding at work. He said that it involved classified materials and access protocols, and that the situation was complicated. He said that their mother was not a bad person. He said that things would be difficult for a while. His daughter cried, his son did not. Hale held them both and felt, for the first time, the full weight of what had been done. Ellen Hale was held without bail. Her trial began in October and lasted 4 weeks. The evidence was procedural and overwhelming. Document access logs, handwriting analysis, testimony from analysts who confirmed that Ellen had occasionally retrieved materials on their behalf, always at times when they were unavailable.
None of the analysts had explicitly authorized her to handle classified documents, but none had stopped her either. Ellen's defense was that she had believed the requests were legitimate and that she had not understood the classification levels. The prosecution argued that the markings were clear and that ignorance was not a defense. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Ellen Hale was convicted on 7 counts of unauthorized retention and transmission of classified information. She was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Thomas Hale attended every day of the trial. He sat in the gallery and watched his wife sit at the defense table, calm and silent, while the details of her actions were dissected and displayed. He watched the prosecutors describe her as a threat to national security. He watched the defense attorneys argue that she had been a pawn, manipulated by analysts who had used her access carelessly. He watched the judge deliver the sentence without emotion. And through it all, he did not speak to her. The FBI had made it clear that any communication could be used against her or could complicate the case. So he sat, and he watched, and he said nothing. After the sentencing, Hale took his children home. They did not ask many questions. Their daughter, now 17, had stopped crying weeks earlier. She had become quiet, withdrawn, focused on college applications. Their son, now 14, had become angry, not at his mother, at the situation, at the unfairness of it, at the fact that no one would explain what had actually happened. Hale tried to explain. He said that their mother had made a mistake. He said that mistakes involving classified information were treated very seriously. He said that the law did not allow for much flexibility. His son asked if their mother was a spy. Hale said no. His son asked if she had meant to do something wrong. Hale said he did not know. His son asked why they could not visit her. Hale said they could, eventually, but that it would take time. His son did not ask anything else. The years that followed were a slow erosion. Hale continued his work at the DIA. He was not asked to leave. He was not reassigned. His clearance was reviewed, renewed, and monitored more closely than before, but he remained in his position. His colleagues treated him with a careful neutrality. Some were sympathetic, most were simply uncomfortable. The institutional memory of betrayal was long, and proximity to a convicted insider, even by marriage, carried a taint that did not fade. His daughter graduated high school and was accepted to a university in North Carolina. She did well. She majored in biology. She did not visit her mother. When Hale asked why, she said that it was too hard. She said that every time she thought about visiting, she imagined her friends finding out, or a future employer running a background check, or someone asking why her mother was in prison. She said that she knew it was selfish, but she could not do it. Hale did not push. He understood. His son struggled more. He visited Ellen twice during his high school years, both times reluctantly. He came back from the visits quiet and unwilling to talk about what they had discussed. In his junior year, he applied to the Naval Academy. His application was strong. His grades were excellent. His test scores were high. He was rejected. The rejection letter did not provide a reason, but Hale knew why. A parent convicted of espionage-related charges was a disqualifying factor for any position requiring a security clearance. His son did not apply anywhere else that year. He took a gap year, worked at a hardware store, and reapplied to civilian universities the following cycle. He was accepted to 3. He chose the one farthest from Virginia.
Thomas Hale visited Ellen 4 times a year. The visits were brief and procedural. They did not talk about the case. They did not talk about what she had done or why. They talked about the children, about mundane things, about nothing of consequence. Ellen never asked him why he had not warned her. She never asked why he had not confronted her before the investigation began. She never asked why he had sat silent in the courtroom while her life was dismantled. And Hale never offered an explanation. There was no script for this. There was no language that could bridge the distance between what had happened and what he had chosen to do. In the 8th year of Ellen's incarceration, Hale received a letter from a lawyer representing a non-profit organization focused on clemency cases. The lawyer explained that Ellen's case had come to their attention and that they believed there were grounds for an appeal or a sentence reduction. The lawyer cited procedural irregularities in the handling of evidence and argued that Ellen's sentence was disproportionate to the offense. The lawyer asked if Hale would be willing to provide a statement supporting clemency. Hale read the letter twice. Then he wrote back and declined.
He did not explain why. The truth, which Hale did not write and could not say, was that he did not know whether Ellen deserved clemency. He did not know whether she had been manipulated or complicit. He did not know whether she had passed the documents to a foreign handler or simply mishandled them out of ignorance. The trial had provided a legal conclusion, but not a moral one, and Hale, who had spent years auditing records and tracking patterns and building the case that had led to her arrest, could not reconcile what he had done with what he believed about his wife, so he did nothing. Ellen Hale was released on parole in the 14th year of her sentence. She was 62 years old. Hale picked her up from the federal facility in West Virginia on a cold morning in November. They drove back to Northern Virginia in silence. She moved into a small apartment in Alexandria. She did not return to their house in McLean. The house had been sold years earlier. Hale had moved to a smaller place in Arlington. The children, now adults, did not come to see her. His daughter had married and was living in Colorado. His son was working for an engineering firm in Seattle. Both had built lives that did not include their mother. Ellen and Thomas Hale met for coffee 3 times in the months after her release. The conversations were polite and shallow. She asked about the children. He gave brief updates. She asked if he was still working. He said he had retired 2 years earlier. She asked if he had remarried. He said no. She did not ask why. On their 4th meeting, Ellen told him something she had not said before. She said that she had not been working for a foreign government. She said that she had not passed documents to anyone. She said that she had signed out the materials because analysts had asked her to, and because she had wanted to be helpful, and because she had not fully understood the risk. She said that she had been careless but not traitorous. She said that the trial had been efficient but not just. Then she said that she understood why he had not defended her. She said that in his position she would have done the same. Hale did not respond. He did not know if she was telling the truth. He did not know if it mattered. Ellen Hale died in her sleep in the spring of the following year. The cause was a heart attack. She was 63. Hale arranged the funeral. It was small. A few former colleagues attended, mostly out of obligation. The children did not come. Hale stood at the graveside and listened to a chaplain read from a script and thought about all the things that had never been said. 3 years later, in accordance with standard declassification protocols, portions of Ellen Hale's case file were released to the public. The documents included investigative summaries, surveillance reports, and internal memos. One memo, dated November 1985, summarized the initial findings of Thomas Hale's audit. Another memo, dated March 1986, outlined the decision to proceed with prosecution rather than pursue a cooperation agreement. The memo noted that Ellen Hale had been assessed as a low-value asset with no direct ties to foreign intelligence services. It noted that her actions, while unauthorized, had not resulted in confirmed transmission of materials to hostile actors. It noted that the decision to prosecute aggressively had been influenced by the institutional climate following the August 1985 arrest and the need to demonstrate zero tolerance for insider compromise. The memo concluded that Ellen Hale's case would serve as a deterrent. Thomas Hale read the declassified documents in his apartment in Arlington. He was 79 years old. His daughter had not spoken to him in 5 years. His son called twice a year, on his birthday and at Christmas. Hale had spent his retirement alone, gardening in a small plot behind his building and volunteering at a historical society that cataloged Cold War documents. He did not talk about his career. He did not talk about his wife. When people asked, he said he had worked in administration. It was not a lie. He read the memo 3 times. Then he folded it and placed it in a drawer and did not look at it again. The story of Thomas and Ellen Hale was not unique. In the years following the August 1985 arrest, dozens of cases were pursued with a ferocity that had not existed before. Some were legitimate, some were marginal. All were prosecuted as if the survival of the Republic depended on it. The institutional trauma of that arrest, the realization that someone so trusted could betray so completely, created an environment in which suspicion became procedure and caution became cruelty. People who might have been counseled were prosecuted. People who might have been warned were surveilled. People who might have been given a second chance were destroyed.
Thomas Hale understood this. He had been part of it. He had audited the records, found the anomalies, and written the memo that set the machinery in motion. He had done his job. He had followed the rules. He had protected the institution. And in doing so, he had sacrificed his wife, his children's trust, and any possibility of knowing the truth. In the final years of his life, Hale thought often about what he might have done differently. He thought about the night he found Ellen's name in the access log and chose not to ask. He thought about the months of silent observation, the careful documentation, the procedural escalation. He thought about the moment the FBI agent had told him not to warn her and the fact that he had obeyed. He thought about all of this, and he could not determine whether his choices had been correct or cowardly or simply inevitable. There was no one to ask. The systems that had dictated his behavior were gone, replaced by new systems with new fears. The people who had issued the directives were retired or dead. The institutional memory that had justified everything had faded into archives and declassified memos. What remained was only the consequence, and the consequence was a family unmade, a marriage ended without closure, and 2 children who would carry the weight of their mother's conviction for the rest of their lives. Ellen Hale died on a Sunday morning in late autumn. He was 83. The obituary in the local paper listed his career as civil service, his hobbies as gardening and historical research, and his survivors as a daughter in Colorado and a son in Washington. It did not mention his wife. It did not mention the case. It did not mention the years of silence or the memo that had changed everything. There was a small service. His son attended. His daughter did not. A few neighbors came, people who knew him as the quiet man in the apartment downstairs who kept to himself and tended his garden. After the service, his son went through his father's belongings. He found the declassified memo in a drawer. He read it once, then placed it back where he had found it. He did not keep it. He did not know what it meant. He only knew that it had been important to his father, and that his father had kept it, and that it had something to do with the years of silence that had defined his childhood. Years later, when historians wrote about the period following the August 1985 arrest, they would describe it as a time of necessary vigilance, a correction to years of complacency. They would cite statistics on insider threats, improvements in counterintelligence protocols, and the restoration of institutional trust. They would mention cases by number, not by name. They would describe policies and procedures and outcomes. They would not describe what it felt like to live through it. They would not describe the families fractured by suspicion, the careers ended by association, the lives ruined by proximity to perceived betrayal. Thomas Hale's story would not appear in those histories. It was too small, too ambiguous, too entangled with the private and the procedural to warrant attention. But it was not unimportant. It was the story of how fear changes people, how institutions, in protecting themselves, consume the individuals who serve them, how the line between duty and complicity becomes invisible when viewed from close enough, how a man can love his wife and destroy her life, and believe, until the very end, that he had no other choice. Ellen Hale may have been careless. She may have been manipulated. She may have been guilty of nothing more than not asking enough questions, or she may have known exactly what she was doing. The truth, like so many truths from that time, was locked away in memos and surveillance transcripts and the memories of people who would never speak. What remained was the fact of her conviction, the years of her imprisonment, and the silence of the man who set it all in motion. This was not a story about espionage. It was a story about what fear does to ordinary people. After Ames.